You probably imagine war as something slow, a grind, years of suffering stretched thin across time. Forget that image. In a single morning, one army lost nearly 20,000 men. Not over months, not over years, in a few hours before lunch. Recent studies by European military historians went back and re-examined recruitment records from the First World War, and what they found shocked even researchers used to dealing with tragic numbers. Whole towns, small towns, sent their young men to the same place on the same day, and whole towns on that same day lost an entire generation. Almost no one was left between the ages of 20 and 30. How is that possible? How did an entire continent manage to wipe out one age group almost completely in a matter of months? Stay until the end, because the answer isn't just in the weapons, it's in a system built piece by piece to turn human beings into disposable numbers. Picture an ordinary morning, early July. The air is still cold, but the sun already promises heat. A young British soldier lies in a trench. He is 20 years old, maybe younger. Beside him, his childhood friend. On the other side, the neighbor from the street where he grew up. Behind him, his older brother, who insisted on enlisting alongside him. They all belong to the same battalion, a battalion made up entirely of men from the same town, schoolmates, teammates from the local football club, sons of families that have known each other for generations. This model had an almost gentle name, Pals Battalions. The idea seemed good on paper. Men would fight with more courage beside people they knew, beside people they loved. No one thought about what would happen if that battalion was destroyed entirely at once. At 7:30 in the morning, whistles sound along the front line. It is the beginning of the Battle of the Somme. Thousands of men climb out of the trenches at the same time. They walk, not run. They were ordered to walk in organized rows, carrying nearly 30 kilos of equipment. On the other side, waiting, are German machine guns. A single machine gun operator can fire hundreds of rounds per minute, one weapon, against hundreds of bodies advancing shoulder to shoulder, in the open, with no cover. The industrial machinery of war kicks into motion like a gigantic set of gears. Heavy artillery, barbed wire slicing through the advance, poison gas creeping across the ground like a cruel fog. Within a few hours, the British Army records roughly 57,000 casualties. Approximately 19,000 soldiers die before noon. It is the worst day in British military history. Meanwhile, in towns like Accrington, Sheffield, Barnsley, life goes on as normal. Bakers open their shops, children walk to school, mothers cook dinner, thinking of the sons who would come home one day, whole. They don't know yet. The news takes weeks to arrive, but the entire battalion from their town no longer exists. This is the fragility no one wants to see. Everyday life goes on exactly as before, while somewhere, a system of destruction finishes consuming an entire generation. Watching over the value of a human life has a price, and at that moment in history, no one seemed willing to pay that price before it was too late. To understand how we got to that point, we have to go back decades, long before the trenches. At the end of the 19th century, Europe was living through a dangerous kind of optimism. Empires were growing, factories produced steel on a scale never seen before, science was advancing fast, trains crossed continents, and alongside all that progress, arsenals grew too. Machine guns were invented, artillery became more precise and more lethal, advanced chemistry made it possible to create gases capable of destroying human lungs. But military tactics did not keep up with any of it. Generals still thought about war the way they had in the 19th century, large infantry formations, advancing across open ground, like in Napoleonic battles, personal bravery, frontal assaults. No one had yet grasped that technology had changed the rules of the game completely. Why did entire armies keep using old strategies, even in the face of weapons capable of killing hundreds per minute? The answer is simple and frightening. A failure of imagination in the face of the new. Modern warfare had been born, but the commanders still thought like their grandfathers. That mismatch between old tactics and new technology would become the engine behind one of the greatest massacres in human history. Here is the most disturbing part of this story. The system meant to protect soldiers, the very system created to give combatants strength and courage, was exactly what amplified the tragedy.
The PALS battalions were designed as a solution, a clever recruitment strategy. Friends fighting side by side tend to be more loyal, braver, more willing to sacrifice for one another. But there was a hidden trap inside that good intention. When an entire battalion came from the same town, and that battalion was wiped out in a single attack, the whole town felt the impact at once. There was no spreading out of the loss, no gradual mourning. It was all, or nearly all, at once. Small towns in England lost nearly all of their young men in a single July morning in 1916. The solution meant to strengthen the army by uniting men who trusted one another became the perfect mechanism for erasing entire generations from specific communities. That is the cruel irony of modern war. Systems built with good intentions, optimized for military efficiency, often carry within them the potential for destruction on a scale no one foresaw. But England was not the country that suffered the most proportionally. That grim distinction belongs to France. No other major European power lost as many men relative to its population as the French did. The numbers are hard to process. Roughly 1,400,000 French soldiers died in the war. That is approximately 16% of all the men who were mobilized for combat. Think about that for a moment. For every 6 French men who put on a uniform, 1 never came home. The result was a demographic imbalance that would reshape entire families for decades. After the war, men between 20 and 35 were missing across nearly every region of France. Thousands of women would never find a partner to marry. The birth rate collapsed at the exact moment the country needed most to rebuild. Some families lost every single son, not 1, not 2, all of them. Entire villages raised monuments with endless lists of names, surnames repeated, belonging to the same family, carved one below the other into the same cold stone. Germany also paid a monstrous price. Roughly 1,770,000 German soldiers died. Russia lost a very close number, approximately 1,700,000 men. In practically every country involved in the conflict, almost no family remained untouched. Someone was always missing from the table at the next Christmas. And the most disturbing part is that most of these deaths did not spread evenly across the 4 years of war. They concentrated into brutally short windows of time. At Verdun, over roughly 10 months in 1916, approximately 300,000 men died, fighting over a strip of land that, in the end, barely changed hands. At the Somme, in a little over 4 months, more than 1 million people were left dead, wounded, or missing. That is why historians often point to 1916 as the year an entire generation of European youths, in their words, consumed by the war. Consumed, as if they were fuel, as if they were a resource. After the guns fell silent in 1918, Europe woke up to a void that no peace treaty could ever fill. An expression emerged that would carry across the century, the lost generation. It did not refer only to the dead, buried beneath fields that today look calm and green. It also referred to those who came back, men who returned home with their bodies intact, but with something essential destroyed inside. Trauma, silence, nightmares that never ended. Writers like Ernest Hemingway and Erich Maria Remarque each tried in their own way to put in words the weight of what they had witnessed. Their work doesn't just describe battles, it describes what remains of a man after he passes through a system built to turn him into a statistic. The question that lingers more than a century later is an uncomfortable one. How many times does humanity build systems that are too efficient for goals that should never be that efficient at all? The First World War was not just a conflict between nations. It was the first great collision between the naive bravery of the 19th century and the destructive capacity of the 20th. Machine guns, heavy artillery, poison gas, barbed wire, each piece on its own seemed like just another technological advance. Together, they formed a machine capable of erasing an entire generation in a matter of months. More than 8.5 million soldiers died. Roughly 21 million were wounded, many of them marked forever, physically or psychologically. And all of it happened because a system, built to win wars, was optimized to the extreme, without anyone stopping to ask what would happen once it worked too fast. That is the lesson that carries through the years, quiet, hidden among numbers that are still hard to believe even today. Every structure built by human beings carries within it the possibility of turning against the very humans who built it. The question that remains is not only about the past, it is about the present, and about what we are still willing to optimize without ever asking the real price of what that might cost.